The planet Vashig is an industrial planet which a decade ago built a media complex where its old power station used to be and supplies imported televised media from various galaxies. Some of the best shows were beamed down onto the civilians' screens, like the soap opera Springbok and the action-adventure serials of Flash Fearless vs. the Zorged Women. When anyone walks inside the complex, there was a metal structure in the lobby and it was 3 letters piled onto each other. VIC. One of the complex operators, Mancini, headed to a large room with a large screen filled little screens showing all the programs being transmitted and approached one of his colleagues, Golda. He told Golda that he'd retrieved 10 film reels from an unknown collector and that it's the presumed missing episodes of Professor X. Golda nearly fell from his chair and got up amazed by this discovery. He asked what they were. Mancini said it's the 4-parter Vault of the Cyborgs and the 6-parter The Snow Vikings. Golda held in his excitement and then an idea popped into his head. Maybe they should transmit the 2 serials over consecutive evenings, and Mancini joyed at the idea. He said to Golda that he'll have to go to the restoration team to get them spruced up and then speak to the controller to be approved. Mancini walked off and Golda returned to his station. He let off a small whoop. The TARDIS materializes on the planet's surface. Inside, the Doctor was putting his jacket on and waited for Louisa. She came to the console room. She'd been for a swim in the TARDIS swimming pool. For some strange reason she decided not to change out of her black one-piece swimsuit, only putting on a denim jacket and a pair of white go-go boots. He rolled his eyes but didn't say anything to her. When she passed him, he saw some stitching on the back of the denim jacket and it was a 3-letter name. He lost his breath for a second and then put his hand over his mouth. She turned back and asked him if he was okay. He said to her he had a hiccup and she jokingly said he'd been drinking too much of that absinthe. The two walked out and the Doctor looked around at his surroundings, but he ended up getting distracted by Louisa. He said to her that she's seriously walking around looking like that and she replied back saying he never complained when they went to Florana. The Doctor just scratched the back of his head at this response. Louisa walked a few yards and called him over. There was an area filled with white large pods and he said to her that these must be living quarters for the planet's residents. As they walked to the pods, he noticed that every one of them was clogged with rubbish, like hoarders had gone up to 11, and he decided to enter one of them. Louisa followed him and clearly away all the piled up junk and then a strong cheesy sweaty smell blown into their faces. Her eyes began to water and the Doctor put his arm over his nose. A sound of laughter was heard from the back room and the Doctor and Louisa headed towards it. When they walked in, they saw one of the planet's residents in a disgusting state. The being was like a large pancake with jaundiced skin and both its arms and feet were stretched because of the extension of its body weight. The Doctor walked slowly to it and then it let out a scream like a schizophrenic hospital patient. The two travelers were disturbing its watching and Louisa told him that they are getting out of here. The Doctor mumbly agreed and they headed outside. He looked at the other pods. He retorted that these civilians were being turned into psychotic couch potatoes and were slowly killing themselves. Louisa said they probably looked like this for how many 100 years, and then he gravely stared. He said to her that it's the influence of technology warping the minds, binging and being isolated under a roof. Even on Earth her people will become like that from the late 20th century onwards, not as flat and decayed. He then looked on at the media complex in the distance with a beam of light sticking out into the dusky sky and said to Louisa that the complex will the source of all this near increased body count. The Doctor and Louisa walked up to the entrance of the media complex. One of the security cameras zoned in on them and let out a small beeping sound. Then some red lasers scanned them and then the big front doors opened. She wasn't sure if anyone was expecting them and the Doctor said it's probably a security thing with allowing visitors. He then shrugged his shoulders because he wasn't quite sure either and then they walked in. In the lobby Louisa looked around at the architecture. It had shiny silvery marbled tiles and a large golden chandelier with beaded crystals entwined. The Doctor was interested with the VIC structure. It seemed out of place in the luxurious style of the lobby. Maybe it's the company logo, and then his attention got diverted when one of the media complex's employees approached them. She was called Kazkrik and politely asked if they are here for to give them distribution rights. The Doctor said, distribution rights for what? Kazkrik turned to Louisa. She told them about sex tapes being approved by the ones either made them or involved in. The Doctor was baffled and disgusted about this. He's totally against having intercourse with people, especially with his companions. Kazkrik then pointed to Louisa and what she was wearing. The doctor turned to her saying she should have worn something less revealing. Louisa took umbrage with this and said to Kazkrik that she doesn't do that sorta anymore. It was only a one-off. Kazkrik then asked if she had the erotic film and Louisa said to her that she doesn't. It probably got lost or not reached the editing stage. Kazkrik's polite mood changed a little sour and told them to leave. The doctor then mentioned about the residents in their pods and the condition they're in. Kazkrik moved slowly back from them. He sternly walked towards her. Louisa tried to hold him back but he gave her a quick little nudge with his elbow and then grabbed Kazkrik's arm tightly. He wanted to know what was going in this media complex and Kazkrik in a freaked out manner said she'll take them to the offices. The doctor agreed to this and the two followed Kazkrik up the flight of stairs. The VIC structure quietly let out a metallic screeching sound and a vibration run through its metal structure. Kazkrik walked into the large media room with the doctor and Louisa. She quickly left to the two behind and Louisa said to him that he freaked her out. He said to her that he needed to get to the heart of the problem either using politeness or interrogation. He walked over to one of the employees who was at a screen with earpieces in. He tried to get the employee's attention even waving his hand in front of its face and still nothing. Louisa headed down to where the large screen was and headed to next to one. She leaned against the desk and started to shake her backside. Golda asked what she was doing and why she was in here. Louisa jumped at this. The doctor came down and asked Golda about this media complex. Golda said this is Vex Intergalactic Communications, the major media broadcaster in the multiple galaxies, supplying entertainment that is either low-budget schlock to high-budget productions. An announcement then interrupted their conversation and then the opening titles of the Professor X serial Vault of the Cyborgs came on. The doctor watched this and then he started to become angry. It was like someone had plagiarized his encounter on Telos and making a send-up of his second incarnation. In retaliation the doctor brought out the sonic screwdriver and pointed it at the large screen. Golda frantically asked what he was doing. The doctor said he's doing some scrambling with the electrics. The screen went black and some sparks flashed out. Golda shouted at him for this sabotage and that he'll lose his job. The doctor said to him that Golda will probably end up like the rest on the surface of the planet. Golda asked why and then he started to scream in pain. The doctor noticed a chip at the side of his head and then Golda fell to the floor. He checked his pulse. Dead and Louisa said at least his eyes didn't explode out of his head. The doctor grunted at this and then the doors opened. Three figures walked in and the doctor seemed to recognize them. Jeremy Clarkson, Joe Pasquale and Rosemary Conley. He was truly baffled by this and then they forcefully grabbed him and Louisa. Clarkson said they are taking to the controller. The doctor and Louisa were taken up to the top of the media complex. They were then thrown to the floor by Clarkson, Pasquale and Conley. Once the doctor got up, he saw what the controller was and like before he was quite baffled. The controller was a rusted steam train the size of a kiddie ride you find in shopping centers and leisure centers. It called itself Titus and it looked on at the doctor. It retorted to him saying he sabotaged the main hub for broadcasted shows and during a special viewing of a Lost Professor X serial. The doctor said the show was plagiarizing his history and travels. Titus just scoffed at this and didn't believe that the doctor was the inspiration. Louisa looked at Titus. In her mind he was a creepy demon. His eyes were pitch black. His face was gray with wrinkles like he forget to moisturize for a decade and that mouth slopping and dribbling salvia when it uttered a word. The doctor asked Titus how he became into existence and Titus said he's a synthetic. Along with Clarkson and the others, they were represented mascots for high viewings and popularity. But a year ago they broke their programming and taken control of the media complex. How did that happen? Titus then mentioned Daddy. The doctor then asked who was Daddy? Where is he? Titus said he's in slumber in the lobby and is preparing to wake up when his little one is angry. Louisa turned to the doctor and said does Titus meant the metal structure? The doctor pondered in a confused attitude and then said to Titus is Daddy psychically linked to him in some kind of way? Titus didn't say anything and only said that Daddy will wake up to sort them out. Louisa shouted at Titus for letting Daddy dispose of them and the doctor chimed in about the residents in the pods. Titus said that the inhabitants are worthless pieces of junk and that killing them slowly will be seamless. The doctor then shouted at him for committing a sort of genocide to innocent life. Titus then cackled at his bluffing the doctor's response and he returned the conversation with something to do with capitalism. The doctor just stood still and glared his eyes at Titus. Titus then ordered the synthetics to get rid of the doctor and Louisa. The doctor and Louisa quickly maneuvered away from the clutches of Titus and his synthetics. He used the sonic screwdriver to open the lift shaft. The lift was below the complex, but then clanging sounds began erupting from the bottom of the shaft, and then the doctor's eyes glared at what it was. Daddy had awoken and was getting up to the top. It then frantically climbed up the shaft and the doctor pushed Louisa out of the way. It leaped through the lift door and let out a ear-piercing metallic screech. Titus called out to Daddy and said those people were bad to him and made him sad. Daddy jolted to the doctor and Louisa. Louisa was freaked out by the sight of it and thought it was going to flatten her. The doctor told her to get into the lift shaft. She thought he was insane, but he told her to and entered in. The doctor quickly followed her in and shut the door with the sonic screwdriver. Daddy began to bang the lift door, denting it furiously, and the doctor told her to hold on tightly, ready for a fast ride, and then used the sonic screwdriver to release the holdings. They then dropped down rapidly with Louisa letting off a shrill scream. They reached the bottom of the media complex and Louisa was shaken by the fast de-elevation. The doctor looked around and realized that this is the power core, and then saw some signs that belonged to the power station that originally was. An idea popped into his head and Louisa sussed his behavior, knowing he's got a plan. He said to her if the media complex was built on the remains of the power station, it means that the core is still active, and he then said to her that he's going to blow it up. Louisa was taken aback by this, and then the doctor handed a small device. She asked what it's for and he said it's a teleportation device to take her back to the TARDIS. Louisa said to him she wanted to stay with him, but the doctor refused and pressed a little button on the side of the device. He said it'll get her back to the TARDIS, but mentioned that he only recently constructed it and wasn't sure if it will take her back. She angrily said to him that he's using her as a guinea pig, and then she abruptly left in a flash of blue lightning. The doctor took a breath, hoping she can make it to the TARDIS. Daddy then emerged from the lift shaft along the synthetics, and the doctor quickly had to navigate his way to the core. Louisa got teleported to the TARDIS. She went to the console and frantically started pulling lever and pushing buttons. She screamed out that she needed to be back with the doctor, by his side and taking down the complex. Then the time rotor started to go up and down. Louisa didn't know what was going on and wondered if it was taking her back to her time. It then stopped and Louisa walked slowly to the doors. She opened the door and then suddenly heard an explosion from a distance she was facing. Then she saw the doctor turn a corner and was running towards the TARDIS. He shouted at her to get back inside. She noticed a large blaze of fire tailing him from behind and quickly moved back to the console. The doctor raced in and the blaze caused him to be thrown forward to the console. He landed face first onto the console and tried to stand up. Louisa came to his aid and asked if he was alright. He caught some breath and then leaned against the console. He brought out another device from his jacket pocket, something like a homing device, and she said did he made that as well. He said he didn't. He stole it and will explain later on how he got it. The doctor turned his attention to the scanner and looked at the charred remains of the media complex. Titus, Daddy and those synthetics had perished in the blast. Louisa said to him what about the people in the pods? He only said that the screens won't work and that they'll have to do another form of activity to pass the time, like going outside or reading a book. Louisa then turned away from the console to relax herself in the swimming pool, and the doctor said to her before she can go could she put something decent on when they next land. Louisa gave a chuckle and flailed her arms in amusement. The doctor just gave a little smirk and turned his attention to the console.